Excited to be here. Thanks, Archetype, for hosting. Excited to talk a little bit around Helium and kind of what we've been up to for the last 6 years now. So Helium, we build decentralized, we build wireless networks and incentivize that using crypto as the incentive mechanism to stand up that coverage and also use the network. Based on the fact of Don being in the room, you're probably wondering, well, what's the difference between the two? And they actually work very symbiotically. The way that I kind of typically explain it to folks is what Don is doing in terms of covering regions, covering neighborhoods. I always talk about Helium as kind of more that last mile connectivity of how do you actually make sure that when you're not next to necessarily a venue, when you're not set up to your internet service provider, how do you actually think about wireless on the day-to-day basis, the way that we're really using kind of our phones as we're kind of out and around every day. So that's usually the way that I kind of explain it, if you feel like that's probably accurate, Neil.
Pretty accurate.
Yeah.
You guys do the stuff that moves, we do the stuff that doesn't move.
There you go. So the two work together. Decentralized wireless for the win all around. But what types of wireless networks does Helium run? So it's two. So originally it started with an IoT network, Internet of Things, low power, long range. So think about kind of those like dumber sensors of, is something moving? Is it on or off? Is it, what's the humidity? What's the temperature? Think of physical goods, asset tracking. That's a lot of where the network was originally inspired by. It was very capital intensive to build IoT networks, so that's where everything started when the Helium launched in 2019. And over a few years have evolved to build out a mobile network where we're seeing a lot more of the traction now with the flagship product with Helium Mobile. And again, that's more of thinking about kind of just cell phone use and where you can have better connectivity, given the fact that 5G requires more density for cell networks. Also just the ability to kind of create coverage where there isn't none. So think about those cafes, think about those dead zones in urban areas, rural areas where you're just simply undercovered. So touched on a little bit of this. Helium is the largest decentralized network globally. The idea that we can kind of build targeted carrier grade coverage anywhere in the world and to kind of incentivize that. Been seeing the adoption in the last year from major mobile network operators and so MNOs and MVNOs. What do those mean? Mobile network operators, think about the likes of an AT&T, a Verizon, T-Mobile. You're talking about large carriers that actually own a lot of their infrastructure, not all of it, but own a lot of the infrastructure they're actually using to provide that coverage. So you're thinking about, those little macro radio towers you see around the city. Some of those are owned by major carriers. MNOs, think about the likes of Mint Mobile as an example, or Boost Mobile. Those are the ones where they don't necessarily own the coverage, they don't own the radios, they don't actually own the real estate, they're actually roaming into other coverage provided from whether it's major carriers or other infrastructure operators. So lesser known, not as much household names, but Crown Castle, American Tower, the people that actually go out and they acquire the real estate. They put up the radios and they actually sell that coverage back to carriers and virtual network operators. So think about it in the sense of, it's historically been a very enterprise top-down model. So that means that, obviously everything comes back to shareholders. So dense areas, high traffic zones. So what does that mean for rural areas, underserved urban environments, supply lines, places where you don't necessarily have a significant amount of coverage? That is really where Helium and a lot of the other deep-in projects in general are thinking about that kind of bottoms up of how do you give agency to people to deploy that coverage, earn on it. My analogy is a little bit different from Neil's. If I say what Airbnb did for hospitality, we're kind of doing for wireless, and that anybody can participate, earn. So you're supporting your house, your cafe, your business improvement district. That's really kind of what Helium was kind of designed to do. But also now where we're seeing kind of our sweet spot in growth over the last couple of years is really around kind of the carrier needs. So, and as I mentioned a couple minutes ago, 5G requires a lot more density. So, go back a few years, we were thinking about kind of 4G cell networks where you had a certain number of space between radios. 5G, higher bandwidth, higher data needs. You need those radios closer together. So this is where traditional carrier infrastructure and community-built networks like something like Helium actually work very symbiotically. Large carriers are trying to bring down their capex. They spend tens of billions every single year. They're looking to trim those costs, not to mention the operational expense of who's actually going and getting those radios up, who's actually handling the maintenance, who's kind of climbing the ladders every single day. They want to bring the cost down on both sides. So the idea that they could actually leverage these other community-built networks like Helium that benefits them, that benefits their subscribers, and that's where we're seeing a ton of growth in the network right now. In that Helium's been adding coverage in those high use areas. It's able to reduce the cost per gigabyte, both for those kind of larger enterprise carriers, but also for something like Helium Mobile, where again, if you're thinking about the real estate costs, the operator costs, all those things kind of price into a per gigabyte cost. When you take out you take out the cost of the real estate, you take out the cost of the operators, you're able to get down to a lower cost per gigabyte on orders of magnitude. So that's cheaper for existing carriers, but also opens up the space for more competition from new providers like a Helium Mobile. So kind of quick hits and where we're kind of seeing like a lot of deployments on the mobile side. It's just kind of really been going really well over the last couple of years. Just examples of what those hotspots look like. You can also look at one right back there on the windowsill. So the reality is most of you are probably using Helium right now and you don't even know it. And that's kind of the beauty. And I think that this is also where kind of DPIN's going to continue to kind of thrive and win of how do we abstract away a lot of that kind of blockchain and the kind of complicated crypto elements for your average user. This is one example of that. Anybody in here who is an AT&T subscriber, you're roaming right into that. You don't even know it. That's the one I can actually talk about publicly thanks to the news this morning. So we talked a little bit about kind of crypto incentives, again, deployed by our community over the last 5 years. Actually, a lot of our initial community, these were ham radio enthusiasts. These were people who did come from telco. So when I think about kind of what our community is made up of, the people that actually go and put these things up and educate the next cohort of people who are adding hotspots to the network, what are best practice, how do we make sure we're thinking about quality, it's actually been a nice self-fulfilling prophecy of how much we see that kind of community engagement of what's the right way, what's the best types of setup, what are the best type of arrestor cables. And that all leads to good quality of service, the right types of deployments. While we've relied historically on a lot of kind of net new coverage, something that we've really unlocked with mobile over the last couple of years is the idea of kind of bring your own fleet. So think about the idea of like campus networks where whether you've got, let's use Ubiquiti as the example, pretty standard original equipment from a well-known wireless access point provider, that these kind of private networks, these campus networks can actually flip a switch, and now they're also they're eligible for carrier offload, and also obviously for Helium Mobile subscribers, they're actually earning on that coverage now. Why does this matter? So in certain places like airports, so let's just, you're a Verizon customer, you're in an airport, you're not actually on Verizon's network. You're roaming most likely into Boingo, which name that many of you might have heard of. But for certain campuses, for certain venues, Boingo's negotiated a relationship with Verizon. They're actually getting that paid data. So there's a business model there. But for certain places that actually deploy out coverage, even like literally a campus and a student body, they don't always have a deal in place. They don't actually are earning from like the capital investment for that campus. So by actually converting these things to earning hotspots on the Helium network, not only is it great for Helium Mobile subscribers and earning there, but again, through that carrier offload program that we're running, they're now earning for actually for the hardware they've put up on their campus or any other types of kind of private or kind of open use networks. And what's carrier offload look like? Just simply, the story has been great over the, we're seeing more and more daily users kind of steadily growing. That number, this is specifically, so I'm not talking about Helium Mobile, which is its own carrier. I'm talking about, again, like the AT&T subscriber that's actively using the network that doesn't see it, the number of users per day, again, we're seeing that kind of steadily climb. And then daily data transfer, not quite the same kind of climb 7 months prior, but we're kind of seeing that starting to tick up a little bit more in the last few months in terms of how much data we're actually seeing flow through the network on a daily basis. And then all of this stuff, again, like any good network, we've got Helium Worlds, our Explorer, so you can kind of go in and evaluate. So if you're thinking about deploying that coverage, you want to put that in an area that you actually have the highest earning potential. So there's a few different models of, there is, where's foot traffic right now? Any existing carrier in the network can actually go in and talk about their expected expansion zones. So you can actually see where there's interest from carriers to actually see more coverage on the network. So carriers can participate. You can see the traffic from Helium Mobile. You can see where there's demand. So in terms of active subscribers that are roaming into other networks, those are opportunistic places to deploy net new coverage on Helium. So all of this is available on the Explorer. And then as far as Helium Mobile, so just a point of clarification, so I'm on the foundation side, so we're kind of more on the side of everything around kind of governance, grants, and kind of what we're doing to kind of expand development on the network. Helium Mobile, which is run over at the OpCo side as a carrier, that's just seen like an incredible growth in subscriber count, especially over the last kind of several months. So 180 and counting as of yesterday, I think that's the number. So yeah, again, competitive pricing. You can actually roam internationally actively, and they launched their free plan, I think, a couple months ago now. So great that we're actually seeing that kind of growth within the network. As far as some of the deployment case studies, so one of the more successful ones is we were approached by Telefonica. So one of their subsidiary organizations in Mexico is called Movistar. They were looking to significantly expand coverage. Part of that was a kind of a CapEx problem for them. Some of it legitimately was a public safety issue. And the fact that like some of these neighborhoods, they're not the safest places that a carrier wants to go and actually deploy those radios. But the residents, the constituents, the people on the ground, they want that coverage, they want to be there. So again, this is kind of the power of these types of networks where you have that agency, you have that ability to deploy the coverage, and then you also have the incentive to earn on that. So the ability to actually get those hotspots out and deployed, 300 in about 4 days, and then how much data we actually saw flowing through the network, it actually kind of shows for itself. So this was an area where through the protocol, one of the things that we were running for a while was something called boosted rewards. Again, it's the idea of how do you incentivize targeted deployments in certain geographic areas where a carrier has like a designated interest. So through Telefonica, these are the neighborhoods they want to see more coverage, more hotspots deployed, and then you can actually see like all those blue dots are where the coverage was resulting from net new hotspots. So again, yeah, just kind of on this case study, as far as average daily megabytes through, kind of about an hour of daily connection, and then about 5 hotspots we're actually serving on a per subscriber basis. So again, basically this generated enough of a success story for Telefonica that we're rolling out now nationally in Mexico with them as a partner. Kind of smaller local examples I'd like to talk about since we're right here in the city. This is just, again, the ability for kind of underserved neighborhoods, underserved organizations to be able to actually deploy that coverage where it was insufficient previously. So just looking at Children's Aid Center, Upper West Side, where you all of a sudden now had 70 carrier subscribers that were connected, and now you've got a significant amount of carrier data going through, and this is just specifically like one small area that was just kind of underserved and undercovered. And there's dozens and dozens of stories like this, but just kind of talking about the idea of where Foundation as a grant can kind of help some of these kind of underserved areas. But in general, most small businesses, most things we've seen, just the incentives are there and the cost is so low that deploying that just kind of becomes a no-brainer. And similarly, what are we, that way? Yeah, Heavenly Market and Deli, just again, nice little New York bodega, just again, seeing better coverage, seeing a boost in data throughput. And again, this is a revenue stream for these guys. So just kind of good local success stories. IoT, I don't have as much on it today. Also just want to be mindful of time, but I think this is what really inspired a lot of the initial participation from Helium community. Just the breadth and the diversity of use case, I think, is what's kind of inspiring on the IoT side. We're continuing to see more organizations coming in while the protocol revenue isn't matching up to where Helium Mobile is right now, just because of a flagship use case that's literally in everybody's pocket. I think that IoT use cases continue to excite like a lot of our most aligned community in the fact that there's so much social and civic good that comes out of it. Some of the better stories on Helium IoT of the city of Porto in Portugal. Just a wireless service provider that was looking to do municipal services realized that they could deploy an entire flood detection system for the city of Porto. They didn't have to deploy a single hotspot. The city was so significantly covered with Helium LoRaWAN coverage, so that's the IoT standard we use. That coverage was there. They went around and tested with our competitive peers in the space and found that Helium coverage is superior every single time. So again, kind of low cost ability to kind of serve on flood detection. We did a few projects in Spain around air quality in low income areas and construction zones. Again, didn't have to deploy any coverage. It was sufficient for the area. That's kind of one of the benefits of IoT in general. Like a hotspot in mobile might serve a city block or even just kind of like one singular block. IoT, because it's low power and longer range, with the right setup, you're getting 4 or 5 miles worth of coverage. So whenever people ask me, because it comes up all the time, we've seen so many IoT hotspots that have been shut off over the years. The reality is we didn't need that many to begin with. Like New York doesn't need 10,000 IoT hotspots. New York can survive off of 1,000 or 2,000 fine to actually run flood detection, tracking around waste management. We continue to see these things. U.S. Geological Survey, Pacific Gas and Electric. So big names continue to come in and still use it. I think one of the things that I'll just be honest about we're struggling with IoT is it's less of a Helium problem, it's more of an IoT problem of IoT setups in general are not as streamlined as just kind of setting up a carrier. It's really the fact that if you are trying to do anything around kind of smart trackable solutions, you have a piece of software for the data, for onboarding a device, for measuring that data. So what I always tell people is that we are very, very happy to give lots of money from the foundation to anybody that does more plug and play Helium IoT solutions. So anybody who's interested in that space, come and talk to me because we are very, very ready, willing, and eager to fund more plug and play IoT. Helium Home Security, I've told people that 5 times of it would probably be a $20 product if you can set that up right. But anyway, but I think that kind of covers it. Yep. So this is the Porto story. And actually the last IoT story was after the wildfires in LA, team called Torch was able to deploy a significant number of smoke detecting sensors all over kind of the Palisades area for kind of future detection use. And again, the coverage was so significant, not a single additional hotspot or wireless coverage access point needed to be deployed. So, and sorry, one of our, no bias, one of our favorite IoT use cases. I don't even know if you guys are sat in the back row that much anymore, but it was one of the best ways that we got a lot of Helium IoT in people's hands. So more of this. I'm going to cut myself off there. Any questions?